The Tales of a Red Clay Rambler is made possible in part by Starworks, host of the 2022 Woodfire NC International Conference. The conference will kick off May the 21st with two pre-conference events happening simultaneously in Asheville and Seagrove, where visiting artists will load and fire a variety of wood-firing kilns. The main conference runs from May the 26th to the 29th at Starworks in Star, North Carolina, and features artists from around the world discussing the future of wood-fired ceramics. For more information, please visit woodfirenc.com. Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 414 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I talk with Portland-based potters Chris Baskin and Dwayne Sackey. We talk about their apprenticeship together and the time that they spent during COVID, both doing in-person learning and sometimes learning over Zoom and other digital formats. We also discuss the Studio Potters Grants for Apprenticeship, which help to fund and structure their year-long work period. If you'd like to see examples of their work, you can go to chrisbaskin.com or dwaynesackey.com. If you'd like to find out more information about the Studio Potter Grant, you can go to studiopotter.org/apprenticeship-grants. Before we get to that interview, I wanted to thank the folks that have donated to our show. I couldn't do it without the generous support of folks like Creative Hands Gallery, Lynn Brown, and Solomon Jones. If you're interested in getting involved yourself, you can do that on the website. That's talesofaredclayrambler.com/donate. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. I'm going to start with you guys introducing yourselves so that the listener can associate your voice with your name. So Chris, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Chris Baskin. I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Hey, I'm Dwayne Sackey, based out of Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a lot about apprenticeships today. So I thought, Chris, since you're the older one, I was hoping that you would talk about your apprenticeship experience in your early career as a potter, working with other potters. Can you talk about that a little bit?
You know, I did ceramics in high school, and I did ceramics in college, but I really didn't know any artists or what it meant to be an artist. And a few years later, after doing a few things, I moved to Louisville, Kentucky. And I had some experiences coming to work. I knew I really wanted to work with an artist, and I met this lady, Sarah Frederick. It was in the 80s, and she had a very successful crafts business. And there were three other people that worked for her. So I was actually in seminary and in an intensive academic program, but I needed money and I needed a job. And Hadi Abbas, who had been working for her for a long time, left to go to graduate school, and she had an opening. So I would come and throw oil candles for her, and fruit top jars, and bowls of a certain size and shape and form. And Hadi trained me for a summer, and she paid me well. And it was such a wonderful experience to put my books aside and come and be in my body and to make terracotta pots and low fire stoneware pots and be part of this successful ceramics business. And that was an amazing experience. And at the end of that 3 or 4 years, or during that episode, Byron Temple moved to Louisville. And he had a long, successful career living in New Jersey, and had trained with Bernard Leach. And there was an aura about him. He did workshops around the world, was sharp and sassy, and we became good friends and spent time together, met at a wood kiln that Gil Stingle had built. And in time, after I finished my schooling, I spent a year in an informal apprenticeship with Byron. So I did not have to produce work for him. I didn't live and work for him for 5 days a week like he had apprentices most of his career. But he would come to my studio and critique my work, and I would go and work on this jewel wheel that he had. And I would sit on one side and he would sit on the other. And he taught me how to pull handles and how to cut feet. And we looked at books together and we looked at pots together. So that was a concentrated year, and it continued for the next few years. That he was an important mentor. We would stay in touch. We would meet in different towns and fire kilns. We went to museums in DC. So it was incredibly nurturing. You know, he was a nurturing man, different than a lot of other men that I knew. And that was an incredible, important, nurturing experience.
Yeah, and as you're describing these two different experiences, they're very different. You know, like the first one sounds like it was more of a business type situation where through the act of producing, you were going to learn skills. And then the second one, the ultimate product was your brain. You know, like you were making pots with Byron, but it was really how do you cultivate your mind, which I think this is a good sort of comparison about structures of apprenticeship.
Yes, Byron talked about clay intellect. And he had shelves of books and he had ideas. And we were hands-on and we were working, but there was this sense of creating a life in clay and ideas. That was true with Sarah as well, but it was a paid job, and there was financial compensation. And I called them my clay parents, you know, my clay mother and father. They were both essential.
So Dwayne, I want to bring you into the conversation thinking about seeking an apprenticeship and what you were looking for with the relationship with Chris.
You know, I've been fascinated by the ceramic legacy and apprenticeships and different ways of learning. And I learned a lot in community college, and I felt like I learned from my fellow classmates and from my teachers. And after I got my bachelor's degree, I really wanted to dive deeper into the craft because I had focused on art, I think, and firing kilns in art school. And I really wanted to connect with an artist and a craftsperson and go deeper in that way. And meeting Chris at the wood kiln, talking to him about his apprenticeships and connecting in that way, I got excited about the idea of working with him and learning from him and seeing what his studio practice is and learning about his life as a potter. And that kind of got us talking, and sounded like he was interested in taking on an apprentice or a mentee. I was kind of debating whether I wanted to go do this post-bac in Manhattan, Kansas, or stay here in Portland. And I felt like I was kind of just putting down roots here after a couple of years up in Portland, Oregon. And I decided to stay and work with Chris, and I'm really glad I did. I feel like I've been able to get settled and get into a studio practice of my own and learn a lot about his studio practice and work alongside him, and have somebody to relate to and conversate with, and a lot of support. so it really has worked out. And yeah, that's been really good. I'm glad I'm doing it.
So, Chris, when you wanted to take on an apprentice, how did you structure the apprenticeship with Dwayne?
Well, I haven't thought formally that I wanted to take on an apprentice. Although one of my colleagues from Alfred is a bonsai artist here, and he has a beautiful apprentice program structured where he lives in a tiny house in one part of town and he writes a lot. And his apprentice lives in his house and takes care of his garden and his trees. But it was more in meeting Dwayne at the wood firing and having this connection. I had traveled to Africa and have some African friends, and Dwayne's father is from Africa. We talked about different stories from high school and different feelings that we had, and I felt a real connection. And like I had gone through a lot of these experiences, and Dwayne was coming up to them in a special way that he was unique. So I wanted to connect, and I wanted to transmit some of this stuff that was transmitted to me, and I wanted to provide some of the support and encouragement and vistas that I was given by Byron and by Sarah. So it was, this is a relationship that needs to happen. And apprenticeship was a way that it happened for me in the past. And so we had an informal relationship for a while. And then I learned about the Studio Potter and the Studio Potter grants for apprenticeship. And, I just want to say at some point how grateful I am for that structure and for the funds and for Studio Potter and the donor providing that. I think it's a wonderful program and support.
Yeah, and I'm glad you guys were willing to come on and talk today about this, because I want to make sure that people know about this program that Studio Potter offers. It's financial support, and it's also structural support. Like we talked before we got on the mic, it's just nice to have an organization that's encouraging you to have a structure for your teaching with each other and mentor-mentee relationship. One thing I know from talking to other people is that when you have no structure, sometimes people's feelings get hurt because there's different expectations. So by having a structure for the apprenticeship, it's actually helpful, because then you guys can kind of start with the same expectations going into it. So can you either of you talk about like what the actual structure was? Because I think you guys probably signed a contract or some type of, you had a plan going in. So talk about that plan going in, what it was.
Dwayne, I'm really interested in hearing from you, but let me just say that for a while we just became friends, and Dwayne was a student at the Oregon College of Arts and Crafts, and we drove back from the Woodkill together, and we talked, and he told me about his exhibition that he was working on, and growing moss and putting things together and doing an installation, and how he was going to work at at a camp in California in the mountains for the summer. I call it ukulele, but it's
Unilay.
It's got a different name. So we stayed in touch, and we talked about how I could help him, and I helped him to get a studio at the Clay Compound, which is a community studio where I work. We had this sort of informal relationship that wasn't so structured. But then as we applied for the grant, we had to say, what are you going to do on a day-to-day basis? And so maybe you could tell some about how we came up with a plan and how we followed that structure or didn't follow that structure or adjusted and adapted as need be.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the structure, but I feel like we definitely had a kind of an organic growth into the more formal apprenticeship. And after a year of spending a lot of time talking and walking and kind of getting to know each other and working and seeing each other's work, and like less formal but still kind of touching all the bases in one way or another. I feel like we created a little bit of a plan, and we started, we already had a bit of a structure where we met on a certain day a couple times a week, and we either met in the studio or we lived close by. So we would walk. I didn't have a dog back then, but we'd walk with him and his dog and talk and, just kind of strategize and contemplate and go deeper with ideas. And, and we had studio time on top of that. And with the transition into the formal apprenticeship through Studio Potter, we really, solidified a couple dates a week, a couple days a week, where we would meet via Zoom, and where we would meet at the clay compound, and where we would meet at his studio. And so we continued our rhythm, a little bit more structured, and focused on continuing to make work and talk about work. And it's all kind of blended together in my mind. So it's hard to really distinguish everything, because it's been 2 years and it's been COVID too. Like, we started working together and COVID hit, and that really changed the rhythm a little bit. And so we've had to be nimble and flexible. And so for a while we were meeting every week on Zoom, and we would he would be in his studio and I would be in my studio, and I'd be watching him work, and maybe we were working on the same thing and talking about what we're doing. We'd meet up at the soda kiln at the clay compound and fire that off sometimes. And we worked on a Cone 6 glaze class, because I'm not exactly sure how I started working with Cone 6 glazes, but we did a lot of testing with Cone 6, and I realized that this dark chocolate clay body was super sweet. And we were testing all these glazes, and I ended up getting really excited about a couple different glazes on this dark clay, and really just started working mid-range, which is really exciting because I got turnover quick and results fast. And Chris has a lot of knowledge about glazes. I think working with
Val Cushing at Alfred.
Cushing. Yeah. So it's been exciting to kind of delve into the glaze realm and look at surfaces, and making plates was really exciting for me, working with Chris and seeing how he layers the, just design and pattern and meaning on these canvases, really. And it sounds like he got a pretty good technique from Byron Temple on just making plates. And so making them has become second nature to him and now to me, and then decorating them.
Let me jump in a second on structure again. We really learned to use the calendar for a while, and wanted to be precise. So every Monday morning at 9:00, we would meet on Zoom, and we would talk about what's going on during the week. And we did it. We proposed it to Studio Potter, and we did it hard, strong for 6 months. And every Monday morning at 9:00, we talked for an hour or an hour and a half, or sometimes 2 hours. And we had a structure for working in the studio where we would sit down at the wheel together. I've got a couple of wheels there, and Dwayne came over and we made pots together. And a third component of that structure was Dwayne would do work for me. And it was learning by doing. And some of the stuff he knew better than I did. And he helped me reorient and readjust to digital photography and to different photo setups. And he took photos for me for a while at a studio that he made at his house, his studio. And he helped me set up a studio here in my basement to do that. And he helped me buy a camera that, so he helped me with a lot of digital stuff. But I also made him pug clay, and he didn't want to do that. And, but he did, and he learned about stuff, grog and clay bodies, and why are you putting that in there, and what does kyanite do, and what does needle-like structure have to do with anything else? So there was a working component where you're learning by doing, and you're responsible. You've committed to that, and I'm going to take it from you. Thank you. It's good. We've agreed, and we trust each other, but we're responsible to each other.
What's funny is you're both talking about this is that it's like older potter teaches younger potter about clay technology, and younger potter teaches older potter about technology in general.
We talked about that a lot going into it, where, Chris, he knew that that was something that he needed more of, that, a little bit more technological advancement when it comes to really pushing the work forward and making photographs that do the pots justice, and promoting yourself through these new avenues. And so I've definitely tried to help him as much as I can in that realm. And I'm also figuring that out. And I feel like I wish I knew more, because I'm realizing every day how important it is to kind of, finish strong. And when it comes out of the kiln, that is not quite the finish line in this day and age.
Oh, what a good thought. I think you're right. It's like you're 3/4 of the way done when the pot's finished. And then you got to get it to market,
Yeah.
And for us now, the digital world, that's a lot of the ways that we get it to market. But I wanted to switch a little bit and talk. You mentioned, Dwayne, that you do mid-range with the black clay with different color, vibrant glazes on top. But then you guys also have soda fired together, you've wood fired together. And I know, Chris, in your career, you've done terracotta, you've done wood, you've done a little everything. So can you guys both talk about when does material fit your aesthetic, and how did you figure that out?
Yeah, I feel like I'm really inspired by everything I do and everywhere I go and everyone I meet. It's kind of a fluid thing that I'm always ingesting this information, and I have my different outlets, whether it be skateboarding, talking to people, just all these different languages that I've learned to use throughout the years. And, growing up in the mountains, I think I like the kind of sublime, rustic, hard, harsh surfaces and vistas. And I really appreciate that about wood-fired work. I also grew up in the Bay Area, and I have family from Ghana, West Africa. My dad's from there, and I've visited there a couple of times, and they wear bright colors, and that high contrast, like beautiful dark skin and just vibrant colors, and tropics, really. It's like it is the tropics, and I have a great love and appreciation for that as well. And so I think that I've always kind of been in between in a lot of ways, being biracial, and just with the life that I've lived and the way that I've grown up. And so I can relate to a lot of different ways of being and expressing myself. And I find it pretty easy to jump from raw, crusty, wood-fired pottery to super high contrast, glossy pots. I love it all. Yeah. And the soda fire is kind of in between, and I feel like you can get both out of that kiln. And it's definitely different, but they all inspire each other, and they're all interconnected. And I have a great appreciation for lots of different aesthetics, really.
So how about you, Chris? How did you come to a sense of material, connecting your personal aesthetic to a specific range of materials?
Finding context, following process, and forming self has been a series of 3 steps that I've talked about at different times, and I've worked with different materials at different places, and I know that when I was in college, I used the clay that was the college clay, and when I was working for Sarah, I used the terracotta clay that fit her process, and Byron had a commitment to leach and hamada and to high fire work and stoneware. And for a long time, I was just following what was there. There was a time, and in this period of learning from apprenticeship to Archie Bray to Alfred, that I was simply following what happened, and also finding a voice and forming self, and not knowing about myself and not knowing about anything that I wanted to express, but it has come and it came. And so I have learned about materials and the language that they have, and I've learned about different processes and the potentials for communicating that those processes have. And so now, as I have ideas, I can say this form works in the wood kiln, and the things that I want to say through these urns fit in a wood fire process, or this particular type of idea is expressed clearly with this particular process or this material, and this other idea doesn't fit there. I too love color and pattern and the kind of meaning that I can put together with numbers and symbols and colors. And so that fits for me now in an oxidation soda kiln, where I can still have the ideas of atmosphere, of context, of how things are stacked in the kiln, of how the fire marks them. But I have a different palette of color to work with. There are also associations and histories associated with different palettes. And being in the context of 2021, where we can look at East Asia, we can look at Iran, we can look at these different pottery traditions, and we can draw from them and put them together to say what we want to say. You know, this is a context that when I was born, it wasn't around. And you know, if you grew up in medieval Japan, you would maybe use shigaraki clay or bizen clay, but you wouldn't have access to porcelain, or you wouldn't know about jingdezhen. And so this is a different context. And I can draw from history, and I can draw from different materials to try to say and articulate what I want to say and articulate.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Scut is a proud sponsor of the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler. Scut Ceramic Products has been in manufacturing equipment for potters since 1953. Their reputation as a pioneer in innovative kiln design continues with the fourth generation of this family-owned business. Their KilnMaster touchscreen controller offers a sleek, smartphone-like interface that is both intuitive and packed with powerful tools that allow potters to easily program, diagnose, and remotely monitor their kilns. With 5 dedicated kiln technicians on staff and the most comprehensive network of distributors across the globe, you can be assured that Scut will be there for you before and after the sale. For more information on their line of kilns, visit scut.com. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by Amico Brent. For the past 100 years, Amico Brent has been creating ceramic supplies for our community, ranging from underglazes to electric kilns. With over 3,000 products, Amico Brent's top priority is making sure that all of their customer needs are met. From the professional to the student and everyone in between, their high-quality materials enable you to make your best work. To learn more, check them out at amico.com or on Instagram and Facebook at Amico Brent. You can also show them how you use Amico by sharing your work online with the hashtag HowIAmico. Yeah, I want to take a tangent, actually. And I know that both of you have been affected in your ceramic lives by seemingly non-ceramic or non-artistic things. So, Chris, you have a master's in divinity. And Dwayne, I know you've spent a lot of time outside and have worked at camps and worked with children being outside. I think that these things have influenced you guys. Am I right in thinking that these kind of more non-artistic things you've brought into your studio life? And if that's true, how does that affect, like a master's in divinity, the shaping of self through religion? How did that affect your work?
Well, it was nice to get away from that for a long time and to see what happened to me at seminary when all of my ideas and faith structures were sort of challenged and critiqued and really torn down. It was nice to be able to find myself with clay and with a tradition that was 14,000 years old. And, my Baptist tradition was 500 years old, and the Christian tradition was 2,000 years old, and the Hebrew tradition was 4,000 years old. I couldn't make sense of it anymore, but I could make pots, and I could use my hands, and I could be in my body, and I could connect with art, this long lineage of people having experiences and making things. For the first little bit, or long bit, it was just, I can leave that shit out and I can come back and be in my body and I can make something beautiful and I can do something and earn a living and I can use my hands. And over time, I've come back and found ways to put things together in ways that make sense. For 2022, I've been able to understand things in a different way. And I feel like there's such an incredible need for it. And I'm at a point where I want to communicate some of those. And there's so many tools that are available, such as emotional intelligence and social intelligence and the Enneagram and being able to understand differences. And quite frankly, the parallels between ceramic traditions and religious traditions are amazing. And I really am excited about trying to elucidate some of those and communicate some of those without losing, connection to Dwayne, who's ready to have his hands in clay and make a plate and, work with design.
This back and forth between sort of the bigger picture questions that religion asks and the smaller questions that we ask in ceramics is really an interesting topic for me. I have been a meditator for many years, and I was actually looking through your Instagram, and on your studio wall, I noticed that you have a picture of a meditation teacher, and then you have a picture, I think it was a pot sketch, a drawing of a pot that I think Volkus maybe had done. So I just thought that combination was really interesting. Having a meditation teacher on your studio wall showed me that that's important to you.
Yes. Well, just to elucidate that a little bit, for me, ceramics is a contemplative practice. It is a meditation, and it's a time to be quiet, and it's a time to get out of my head and to be into my body. And there are all kinds of contemplative practices. Meditation is a classic one, but, for some people it's sports, for other people it's music, and for a lot of people it's ceramics. And working at Mudshark, I could see people could really get into the zone and leave certain things behind. And this was a meditation practice. And I think today's world that is so fast paced and so busy, and that people need that quiet time, and they need ways to connect with their bodies and their interior, and to be able to do that so we can relate to each other.
Well, Dwayne, can you talk about how being outside and being in a natural landscape has been a meditative experience for you? And then how do you bring that experience into the clay studio?
Absolutely. Yeah, being outside has been a hugely meditative experience for me since I was a young child. My mom grew up going backpacking with her brothers and her dad. He was a teacher, and he brought his high school students out. And she started bringing me out when I was 2.5, and I carried my diapers, and I just loved backpacking and walking. And I didn't go far in the beginning, but just being out there has been really natural to me and exciting. We would go out every 4th of July and kind of get away from the mayhem in the city. And just having that kind of space and, tranquility and peaceful environment is really important to me. And I've grown to really appreciate the landscape and the just the vastness of it all, the sublime nature. and walking too. I think that I have a lot of chatter that I struggle with, and negative self-talk and different things that I really like to get away from. And when I'm walking and I'm tired and I'm surrounded by this epic landscape that's just so much greater than me, there's just no doubt about it. It's really comforting in a way, kind of like being in the ocean, where you have to kind of just accept that you're going to have to keep going, and it's going to be hard, and it's beautiful in its own way. And I find solace in that. And I think that my senses are just engulfed in this beauty that I really respect. And I think it translates into my practice and helps me appreciate all kinds of people and places and things through that lens. And spending time in the wilderness has really fostered an appreciation for organic shapes and processes like erosion and growth. And I try to find nature in everyone and everything that I experience and foster that appreciation for life, really, and death.
So you mentioned earlier, Chris, that you like to make urns, or you like to make jars that are used for urns in the wood kiln. Can you talk a little bit about when death becomes the subject matter? When you're making a vessel for the afterlife, how does your thought process change? Because that's a pretty heavy topic.
Well, it is a heavy topic, I guess, and it's also a common topic to everyone. I think it's a rich, deep subject that ceramicists have addressed and ritually engaged for a long, long time. It connects with cycles of geology, like Dwayne was talking about, and we have a sense that there were mountains before mountains and mountain ranges that have become clay, and then there are new mountain ranges. I think making something for death helps me realize that I'm a tiny little blip with a lot of significance and a lot of consciousness. It's a lot bigger than me, but I too have a lot of significance. I anticipate dying myself pretty soon, and my parents and my parents-in-law are in a place of passing tomorrow or 5 years from now. It's a kind of experience that helps one be alive, and a knowledge of mortality is good, and life isn't everything.
Yeah, somehow an urn acknowledges the reality of that experience in a way that my everyday life doesn't. As a person, I'm pretty ambitious. I tend to be looking forward, like, what's the next thing I'm going to do? And that acknowledgement of death, it's a shocking thing, but as a spiritual practice, I have found it also very helpful as a contemplative exercise. I just saw the urns. They're also so beautiful design-wise. I mean, a lot of the lids, I can tell you've been influenced by Byron Temple's work in the way that you'll tie the lid on, and they have clasps and attachments. Like, there's all these formal things that are also beautiful about an urn.
Yeah, I love the formal qualities, and I do feel free to draw from Byron. And in terms of process, I often start with tradition and with understanding, and want to have that as a base. And I hope to go beyond and to push tradition forward. I can remember hearing Clary Ilian talking about just making a little change and just doing a little something different. I'm excited about. I was thinking about West African casket makers. I know there's a great tradition of that, and one dream this past week was, you've got to explore that. Another part of that dream was a dream about Chris Guston and making these asymmetrical giant vases, and so it was. In this dream was putting together this asymmetrical foil process and seeing what the West African casket makers who do cars and all kinds of wild forms, and just expanding a little bit on urns and traditional processes.
Those caskets are amazing. I've seen a bunch that had animal forms that were on them, and that are just the idea that you would put that much labor and love and consideration into something for death, I think, is one of the greatest honors you could give someone.
Yeah, well, that's meaningful work.
Well, let's shift and talk about an upcoming woodfire conference that you guys, I think, are both going to be a part of. This is going to be in June, I believe. So can you talk about that?
You bet. Dwayne has done a leadership kill there at East Creek Art and East Creek Onagama, which is the oldest Onagama on the West Coast. And Tom Coleman and Frank Boyden and Niels Liu were instrumental in building that kill. And it's been bought and taken over by a young potter, Joe Robinson, who's a colleague of Dwayne's, maybe a little bit older. Joe's created all kinds of opportunities there. But the conference is going to be the 2nd through the 5th, and there'll be demonstrations, there'll be panels, there'll be movies, and a theater. I think Peter Callis is going to show a couple of films. We've got people from all over the area coming and from outside the area. It's going to be really exciting with exhibitions, and you can find it at northwestwoodfire.com.
And the East Creek, tell me the name again of the kiln.
It's called East Creek Onagama, and it's in the coastal range of Oregon, about an hour and a half from Portland. Willamina is Timbertown, USA, and of course there are amazing trees all over Oregon. There's another fantastic woodfire complex here down in Eugene called the Pleasant Hill Pottery, and Jesse Jones has 5 wood kilns there and a residency program there that's kind of quiet, but they will be firing the week before, and lots of other kilns around the area will be firing.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure we threw in another plug for the Studio Potters grants for apprenticeship before we wrap up here. That's something that funded the apprenticeship that you both did, and this upcoming year's deadline is coming up. The applications, I think, start on May the 1st and wrap up on June the 1st. So if people are interested in participating in that, they can apply at studiopotter.org. Before we go, can you guys both plug your own social media just in case people wanted to get in touch and talk about any of the ideas that came up today?
I'm at chrisbaskin.com, and I'm on Instagram at chrisbaskinpottery.
I've got pots on Dwayne's Pots Instagram. That's my handle, DWAYNESPOTS. And I also update my website fairly regularly. I'm hoping to update more regularly and get into a good rhythm, but DwayneSackey.com. That's DWAYNESACKEY.com. And if you go on there, you can join my mailing list. And I've been meaning to write more friendly things and send nice photos out other than just web shop updates, but I don't really like reading emails. And so I assume other people don't, but people have told me I should probably give more content. So I might send some nice emails one day. Yeah, but I'll definitely let you know when I'm going to update my website.
Well, thanks, guys. It was a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Chris and Dwayne for taking the time to do this interview. It was a pleasure to chat with them and hear about the Grants for Apprenticeship program. I'd like to thank today's sponsors. That includes Starworks, which is hosting the 2022 Woodfire NC International Conference happening May the 26th through the 29th in Star, North Carolina, as well as Amico Brent and Scut Ceramic Products. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor on the show, we would love to have you. You can get in touch through our website. That's brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, Or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.
We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities whose lands we reside on in the United States, and recognize that we are uninvited guests on the occupied, unceded, and ancestral lands of over 500 nations indigenous to North America. By acknowledging and reflecting upon the contemporary lived experiences and histories of the Indigenous peoples here and globally, we may begin to take essential steps towards creating a more equitable world. Learn more through the hashtag Honor Native Land initiative of the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, and consider contributing to Indigenous-led organizations doing important work to further health and wellness, sovereignty, and self-determination of the first people of the lands you reside. This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.